Our call to community for January is number 362 in your hymnal, a classic traditional hymn, Rise Up, O Flame, here performed by Leah Morris.
Rise up, O flame, by thy light glowing, bring to us beauty, vision, and joy. Rise up, O flame, by thy light glowing, bring to us beauty, vision, and joy. Rise up, O flame, by thy light glowing, shrink to us beauty, vision, and beauty and joy. Rise up, O flame, by thy light glowing, shrink to us beauty, vision, and joy. Rise up, O flame, by the light glow, shrink to us beauty, vision, and joy. Rise up, O flame, by the light glow,
Welcome to the Westside Unitarian Universalist congregation. I am Liz Bucklew, and it is my great joy to be gathering with you this morning, along with our minister, the Reverend Christopher. Marco and Larry are our tech experts today, connecting us virtually as we continue to monitor the pandemic situation and yearn to be together again. It is a blessing to be able to worship together and to be here with all of you today. If you're with us for the first time or the first time in a while, welcome. We're so glad that you are here to share in this time, to make some space in your life, to attend to your heart and your spirit, to come together in community. Please visit our website to fill out a Getting to Know You welcome form so that we can send you our weekly electronic newsletter, the Westside Week. It's full of information about upcoming worship services and other virtual activities. We hope that you'll join us after the service for conversation and community, catching up with everyone and seeing warm faces on this mild, hazy January day. We gather from many locations, and we take this moment to particularly acknowledge that our congregation resides on the traditional territory of the Duwamish people. In this acknowledgement, we recognize the Duwamish heritage imbued in the mountains, valleys, waterways, and shorelines that surround us all. May we nurture our relationship with our coastal Salish neighbors, especially the Duwamish people, and our shared responsibilities to this place. Let us take a moment to offer humble respect for this place and its peoples, and renew our commitments to the work of authentic reconciliation.
Whoever you are, wherever you have come from, whatever the color of your skin, whoever and however you love, however your body moves and your brain works, however you identify, you are welcome in this faith community. Our Unitarian Universalist tradition has no test of faith, no creed or oath to swear. We have instead the promises we make to one another, commitments we make to healing a hurting world within and beyond our walls. Each week I share those words, whoever you are, wherever you have come from, whatever the color of your skin, whoever and however you love, however your body moves and your brain works, however you identify, you are welcome in this faith community. Today I want to expand on them with a little more specificity, with an invitation written by Reverend Deborah Hafner, for whom I worked at the Religious Institute, which is a multi-faith organization dedicated to advocating for sexual, gender, and reproductive health, education, and justice in faith communities and society. Reverend Hafner writes, "You are welcome here. If you are straight, gay, lesbian, bisexual, intersexual, demisexual, pansexual, or asexual, or resist labels completely, you are whole and welcome here. If you are transgender, non-binary, genderqueer, or cisgender, you are whole and welcome here. If you are confused about your sexuality, have questions, struggle in an intimate relationship, or struggle because you aren't in one, you are whole and welcome here. If you had an abortion or an unintended pregnancy, given up a child, had a miscarriage, struggle with infertility or sexual dysfunction, you are whole and welcome here. If you have been the victim of sexual abuse, sexual harassment, or sexual assault, you are whole and welcome here. If you have made sexual decisions or had behaviors that you regret, you are welcome here, and we will help you offer restorative justice and healing. Your sexuality is holy and sacred and an integral part of who you are. You are whole and welcome here. As Unitarian Universalists, we will side with you, love with you, and fight for your rights, for our rights together. We seek to create a world where sexuality and sexual diversity is celebrated with holiness and integrity. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen. In today's service, we'll be talking about reproductive justice and abortion. For some, this can be a difficult topic, and I encourage you to reflect on where you're at, what you need. We'll share a video of Carolyn Boole, a UU elder from First Unitarian Portland, sharing her experience of seeking an abortion and the activism it drew her into. We'll share a few poems as well, and in our time of reflection, we'll engage a body prayer adapted from the words of Thich Nhat Hanh. None of what we'll share is graphic, and nevertheless, this is a subject that can trigger all kinds of stressful responses. I encourage you to be attentive to yourself, your body, your spirit, to step away if you need to contact me afterwards if there are things you need to reflect on or process. Know that your presence here is not mandatory. Care of yourself and your spirit is the best that we can do for each other and for ourselves in this moment. If you're wondering why today we're talking about abortion and reproductive justice, there are a number of practical reasons. Yesterday was the 49th anniversary of Roe v. Wade, and there are suggestions, there's a strong likelihood that it may not see a 50th. The UUA also leads an annual campaign, almost a Lenten campaign, 30 Days of Love, run by the Side with Love campaign. And this week, it has been focused on reproductive justice, with poems and readings and videos for folks to watch and journal on, reflect on, share on, as well as invitations to call and take action, to make connections with local resources. Also, because in this congregation we consider sexuality and comprehensive sexuality education to be a fundamental right. We embrace, with our partner church, the United Church of Christ, the creation of the program called OWL, Our Whole Lives, which is a sexuality education program that covers the whole of the lifespan with 7 different ages of programs. And there are deeper reasons why we talk about this in church and why we should talk about it in church. And it's partly that this is not just a problem that impacts other people somewhere else. For all of us, we may have pieces of a haunting church, experience a church that made judgment of us, a church with which we struggled, when it made judgments of others with which we did not agree. And even if we don't have those personal experiences of it, our wider society instills in us shame and stigma around reproductive justice issues, around sexuality, around abortion, around identity. All of those issues of stigma and shame impact us, sometimes lightly, sometimes deeply. And we need to be able to hold a spiritual community in which we can bring those feelings, those struggles, those pieces of ourselves that have been wounded, and bring them to a place where healing might be possible. We ask, how can we create a space where people feel welcome to bring their whole selves, including their experiences related to sexual and reproductive health? What principles and guidelines can we draw from our whole lives, the program we use with our children and our adults? And how can we draw those values all the way into the congregation? Today's service is an opportunity to reflect on some of those values, to bring back into a values conversation our thoughts and reflections on abortion and reproductive justice and reproductive health. What are the liberating alternatives to policing ourselves and others?
As we light our chalice this morning, I'd like to share these words from the Reverend Kelly Clement called Learn to Tell Your Story. My most impactful life decisions, in chronological order: to have abortions when I needed them, to get sober, to give birth to our child. If each life is precious, then so is mine, so is theirs, so is yours. I'm not ashamed, nor do I regret my abortions. Rather, I am grateful for access to abortion care, professional and compassionate providers, the opportunity to captain my own ship. What I wish for all of us, and especially for my children's generation: robust reproductive justice, health, and freedom without stigma or restriction. An end to heteronormative, patriarchal, white supremacy culture. Love and liberation in abundance. As Reverend Christopher lights our chalice, please join me in speaking the words of our congregation's affirmation. Love is the doctrine of this congregation. The quest for truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humanity in fellowship. Thus do we covenant with one another. Our first hymn this morning is There's a River Flowing in My Soul. Our first hymn this morning is There's a River Flowing in My Soul. Please join me in singing. There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my soul, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river In a moment, we'll engage in a collective act of generosity known as our offering, where we take time to actively support Westside UU and its many ministries with our gifts by text or by check. Each month, we choose a community organization to share 1/3 of our undesignated offering gifts. That is, those donations not designated as your pledge contributions. For the month of January, our community giving recipient is Youth Care Orion Center. Youth Care opened the Orion Center in 1984, and it was one of the first programs in the nation to receive a federal grant enabling 6 agencies working with runaway and homeless youth to co-locate in one building. These multiple partners created a constellation of services, thus the name Orion. The Orion Center serves as a safe and welcoming place for young people ages 12 to 24 during the day. Following dinner, the Orion Center transitions into the young adult shelter, where young people ages 18 to 24 can enjoy a hot meal, work on goals with their case managers, and sleep safely at night. Starting in 2007, Westside members became active volunteers at the Orion Center, with congregants preparing dinners for the young people, and our youth group served meals to over 100 diners at a time. You can give by text by sending a message with a $sign and the amount you want to give to 616-404-4171. If you need to update your payment information, text update to that same number. Thank you to everyone for giving as you are able to support Westside and Youth Care Orion Center. Your generosity of time, treasure, and presence are gifts that sustain us as a community. Now please enjoy Meditation on Breathing from the UU Church of Houston.
I'll breathe out love. For many of us, these last few weeks have brought with them too many reminders of mortality, as we've lost people who have been inspirations, sources of wisdom and comfort in our lives. This morning we recognize the death on Friday of the great Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh, or as he was called by his students, Te. He was 95 when his body stopped breathing, yet, as he said throughout his teachings, there is no death, only continuation. Many Unitarian Universalists have found inspiration and grounding in his teachings, and his death may bring sadness and loss. May we find ways to keep his teachings fresh and alive within us and within our communities. Our pastoral prayer this morning will take the form of a meditation sourced from the wisdom of this great teacher. It's a body-based meditation. For some of us, body-based meditation can activate past trauma. My invitation to all of us is, if this happens for you, know that you are not wrong. Know that you are just as safe now as you were before the meditation began. Know that your consent to participate in this meditation is yours to give, to maintain, to withdraw, however is best for you. I invite you to take a breath in. Home is not exactly located in space and time. Everywhere you go, you can find your true home. This is the first fruit of your practice. If you practice well, you can arrive home with every breath and with every movement. Many of us have been able to realize this. We feel comfortable in our true home. Every breath and every movement can bring us to our true home. In principle, every breath can bring you home. Every step can bring you home. You are not looking for home somewhere else, somewhere in the future, but right here in the here and the now. When we practice mindful breathing, we focus our attention on our in-breath. And we bring our mind home to our body. Our body may be our first home. We have to try to make of our body a home. Do you feel yourself in conflict with your body? Do you struggle with your body? Have you made acquaintance with your body? Can you now feel at home in your body? Our body truly is a wonder of life. Every one of us is a flower in the garden of humanity, but perhaps many of us do not know how to take care of the flower of ourselves, of our body. We have, over time, lost a lot of our flowerness, our beauty, our freshness, and so we sometimes forget how to take care of our body. The first thing to do is to go home and recognize that you have a body. Your body is a wonder. When you spend 2 hours with your computer, you may forget entirely that you have a body. When your mind is not with your body, you are not really there alive. In the teaching of the Buddha, you are only alive when your mind and body are together. Your mind becomes an embodied mind. And how then to bring your body and mind together? Just breathe in mindfully. When you breathe in mindfully, you bring your mind back home to your body. It takes only 2 or 3 seconds, and there your body and mind are united. The fruit is called the oneness of body and mind, and that can be realized in just one in-breath. In the here and now, there are so many wonders of life. First of all, our body is a wonder of life, and the air we breathe in is a wonder of life, and the rain is a wonder of life. A flower is a wonder of life. Everything that surrounds us is a wonder of life. When we go home to our body, we have a chance to recognize all these wonders of life available in the present moment. If we do well, these wonders become our true home. Let us spend a few moments together in shared still, touching that part of our true home available to us now. Amen.
It's easy to frame reproductive justice as the binary of pro choice or pro life, but it's more than a simple debate. Rooted in human rights, reproductive justice speaks to the power to maintain personal bodily autonomy and gender freedom. Activists name three primary principles: the right to have children, the right not to have children, the right to nurture the children we have in a safe and healthy environment. When I was younger, I gravitated toward the idea of not having children. I did a lot of babysitting as a teenager, and folks would gush about how I was going to be a great mom someday. But I chafed at that expectation. My dreams did not include nurturing others, and I felt limited by the prospect of parenthood. Eventually, my feelings shifted, but I didn't become a parent until I was 32. As a lesbian, I've never used birth control. My experience with reproductive health is limited to a fertility clinic and midwives. My parents never discussed sexuality with me or my siblings, but I knew how babies were made. Sex ed in school wasn't much help either. We didn't learn about respect or responsibility. I remember being cautioned to use a phone book rather than sitting directly on a boy's lap. Reproductive justice includes education about our bodies, our health, and our choices. Our Whole Lives, OWL, is a sexuality education offered by Unitarian Universalist congregations starting at kindergarten and on through older adulthood. I'm really grateful that my kids and others have been through OWL programs here at Westside to learn about relationships, sexual health, and gender diversity. There's always the opportunity to learn more, and I sure did when I had the privilege to be trained as an OWL facilitator for Westside Youth. Our kids are amazing, and they taught me so much. Reproductive justice includes access to health care. As a young adult, I went to Planned Parenthood for my first pelvic exam. While this can be a very vulnerable experience, I have never had a more gentle and caring medical encounter in my lifetime. The providers were so attentive and focused on me and my feelings. I remember them explaining every tool, every test, every move. We all deserve that kind of care. That's reproductive justice, my friends.
Thank you, Liz. Our anthem this morning is the beautiful song, I Belong to This World, by Kathleen Tracy, performed by Lisa Maynard, Liz, and Gracie Bucklew.
Just as I am, I belong to this world, being born each moment. Just as I am, I belong to this world,
just as I am, I belong to this world.
Thank you, Liz, Lisa, Gracie, and Kathleen for writing that beautiful piece. I want to begin our sermon today with a video of Carolyn Boole. Carolyn is a member of the First Unitarian congregation in Portland, and the video is entitled My Abortion Story, or An Abortion Story.
When I told him I just could not continue the pregnancy, he said, well, you could go to Planned Parenthood. But he said that with his back turned to me. Well, it was 1969. We were living in a dormitory. My children were 7 and 3, and I had had horrendous postpartum depressions after each of them. And despite using a diaphragm, I got pregnant. And it was just, I was just not willing to go through again what I had been through and to put my family through it. When I told him I just could not continue the pregnancy, he said, well, you could go to Planned Parenthood. But he said that with his back turned to me. And turns out it was not a clinic at all. It was only an educational facility. They asked me all the same questions about why I wanted an abortion and all kinds of intrusive questions. And they finally decided that they could and would refer me to the Clergy Consultation Service on Abortion, which I'd never heard of. So I went to see a minister at the Old South Church. I don't know what denomination it was. And he referred me eventually to a doctor in Montreal. There were 4 of us having abortions, and I was the first. I was hoping this guy was a doctor. There was a woman in a white dress and white shoes, and I was hoping she was a nurse. There was no anesthesia. My pregnancy was very early, which meant that it was more painful than it would have been a couple of weeks later. It was really painful, and I yelled, and he told me to keep quiet. And as soon as he had finished, I vomited up the soup I'd eaten. I did hear one of the women talk about having had an abortion before, and the doctor she named was my doctor who had delivered both my children. Imagine. Several months later, I again had a diaphragm failure and was pregnant again. But this time I thought, let's go the legal route. After all, I'm a school teacher. I'm a law-abiding citizen. So I called Dr. Sewell. He was agreeable, but the routine in Massachusetts at that time was you had to have a psychiatrist's approval that you would take your life if you continued your pregnancy. So I went for that appointment, which was very humiliating. I was energized. I was pretty furious about my experience. And I sought out a doctor at the Boston Lying-in Hospital who was, I think, head of OBGYN. from somewhere I had the information that he was involved with a group of professional people who were planning in Massachusetts to have a counseling service to refer women to New York City once abortion became legal there in July of 1970. At the same time the New York law became legal, was implemented, we moved to Ohio. And there I very quickly got involved in an abortion rights legalization group. There were 4 organizational members of this coalition. Planned Parenthood, of course, where we met, and that was the entity that had secured the funding. The Free Clinic, the Cleveland Women's Counseling, and the Clergy Consultation Service on Abortion, who was represented by an African-American Episcopal priest. So we talked to women who were desperate to have an abortion and referred them either to New York, if they could afford to go, or through this routine in Ohio. In New York, there were 2 very big clinics. I mean, they were seeing women from all over the country. And the one that we referred to was called Women's Services. It was started by the Clergy Consultation Service on Abortion, which was a national, really kind of an undercover ecumenical group. We continued until the law changed until the Supreme Court ruling in Roe versus Wade. There was a heck of a party that night at our house.
Remember it.
You were scared because it was a packed house. Everybody just came. It was packed and you couldn't find your mommy. We were just in disbelief. We could not believe that abortion had just become legal. Like tomorrow it's going to be legal. And it was true that very quickly abortion clinics did spring up, and very quickly we discovered that they were not offering private counseling to every patient, which we thought was very important. And they weren't giving reduced fees to anybody. And a lot of women were seeking abortions because they couldn't afford to have a child. So we decided we had to jump into the fray and have an abortion clinic.
How is that for you now, sitting where we are in this moment in history?
How it is for me is really sad. I was so determined that my daughter should never have to go through anything like I went through. And to think that we are on the cusp of being exactly there once again is just horrifying.
So what difference did it make that there was clergy involved?
I think everyone would agree with my belief that the clergy were like the good housekeeping stamp of approval. They were the legitimizing force. It means a lot to me that Reverend Bill is staunchly pro-choice, and I was just delighted to know that he was a board member of RCRC, the Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice. I could not belong to a church that was not pro-choice. I would hope that there are people within the church who would form a group of pro-choice people prepared to do whatever was needed. I was just listening to a podcast, and John Lewis was talking about the struggle for voting rights. And I thought how important what he said is for reproductive rights now. That the only thing that ever did work was organizing and staying organized and being unwilling to be defeated. Do not give up. You just can't. Because the pendulum will come around again. It's bound to. Because it's right.
In 1966, on the western islands of Montreal, the Lakeshore UU congregation opened a family planning clinic. They were responding to an archaic law that prohibited the distribution of birth control materials, and the Canadian Criminal Code stated that it was an offense to disseminate information on contraception unless it can be proven that it is done for the public good. The congregation had a meeting, decided that this archaic law needed to be challenged, that folks with needs around contraception and family planning needed to have access to information, and that access to information was a right. And so they found three willing doctors and a number of nurses, and they used their building to become a family planning clinic. They took over functionally the whole space. And so that was what became the ministry of that congregation. The Colin Languedoc's written about his parents' experience, his parents, Roddy and Drury, and his mother Rosalind Roddy is the short of Rosalind, and how on the very first night, Roddy was really involved in establishing the clinic, and on the very first night, Roddy took with her an overnight bag just in case the police came and raided the facility, in case they came and raided the church to drag them all off to prison. That didn't happen. Instead, 6 months later, they closed up shop because, having seen that the public by and large was in fact really supportive of family planning clinics and information, and that there was no significant negative response, hospitals all across Quebec rapidly opened family planning clinics within their walls, and family planning clinics were started. So it wasn't a long time that the Lakeshore Unitarian Universalist congregation was the only family planning clinic in Quebec, but they certainly laid the groundwork that became a sexual health revolution in Eastern Canada. That was the church that my grandparents went to when they were in Montreal. And my grandmother, in particular, maintained connections there for many, many years afterwards and was supportive of the work they were doing there. And it is a source of pride for me and my family about the role that our church and that my grandmother's friends had in all of that. It's funny, I think about why is it that reproductive freedom and reproductive justice is so important to me, and I can't help but tie it back to my mother's favorite movie, Dirty Dancing. And the way in which, the necessity of safe abortion became such a pivotal part of that story, and the ignorance that the character Baby had going in and what she learned in that, and the transformation that happened in her. And the fact that still, despite the fact that that was the movie, that was a significant plot point in the movie, that the word abortion was never spoken. Still today, we have a hard time talking about abortion. We have a hard time talking about reproductive justice and reproductive health and access to care. And we have made mistakes in our past. I think about Lakeshore. I listened to Carolyn Bull's story about how many clinics opened without concerns for the financial barriers, or the fact that the barriers that exist for trans and BIPOC folks continue to exist. The barriers for disabled folks continue to exist. That access continues to be something that is primarily available to folks who have privilege in society, and that's a challenge and a problem. We have made mistakes in the past in the movement for reproductive justice. And what was hard for Carolyn to do was almost impossible for others. It's heartening for me to know that as this time comes, as this challenge to Roe v. Wade and challenge to access is ramping up throughout the United States, that there are communities working together to respond. The Clergy Consultation Network, in many ways, is being renewed in a program called Faith Aloud. There are groups in Texas that have been coordinating buses and flights to New Mexico and Arizona, church trips of folks who are going to get reproductive health care and abortions in those states where they're accessible. It's a problem. It's a problem still that so many of our systems are designed to work for folks who are in the most privileged places to be able to afford access. And it's one of those places where I am grateful that the organizing that's being done now in reproductive justice is one that is championing intersectionality, that is recognizing the differential challenges to BIPOC folks, to low-income folks. The principle of the curb cut effect that I talked about a little while ago in a service, that principle where when we make systems accessible to folks for whom there are the greatest barriers, in fact, it opens up access for everybody. It opens up the capacity for everybody to participate. And so we need design systems that work for the most challenge, for the folks who have the greatest number of challenges to accessing reproductive health care. And though they exist beyond those personal identities and into issues of rural and urban and which states we live in and all of those pieces. And while we're well protected relatively in Washington state, we are not employing that resource to the effect that we could for neighboring states that have less progressive and less accessible systems and that are more likely to have challenges to reproductive rights. I'm excited that this week I'll be gathering together for a day with folks from the Sacred Gathering, faith communities reclaiming reproductive dignity and autonomy. It's the first time that there'll be a virtual gathering of justice-oriented people of faith, activists, leaders from the reproductive health, rights, and justice communities. Grounded in shared values of justice, dignity, human rights, compassion, and expansive love, we'll be working together to discover how faith and reproductive liberation are interdependent and how we can become involved and work together. There's already a network of colleagues here strategizing on how to form a Washington state chapter of the Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice. Because of all of this, I am hopeful. Because of what we've learned and are learning from communities of color, communities for disability justice, communities for LGBTQ support, what we are learning from traditionally marginalized groups about community care, about the power of informal networks of supports, about showing up for one another. Because of communities like those and like this one, I am hopeful. I want to close now with this poem from Reverend M. Barclay, a progressive Christian theologian. They write from a place within their own Christian tradition, so for some among us, there may be a need to practice our translation skills to shift to a more expansive language and framing that will help us take in its message, a message that I think is for all of us. The poem is called On Choosing Abortion. God is not a judge who sits at a distance shaking his finger at us about divine rules and regulations. God is within, like a whisper, like a question, like a knowing and a rising. God lures us towards each other, towards collective flourishing, towards power growing from the margins, towards our roots, deep in the earth. God pulls us in every direction that serves love and serves life. And sometimes that direction is abortion. When a woman or a trans man or a non-binary person with a uterus becomes pregnant and must decide how best to foster life, their own and that of their family, and that of this earth breaking under our burdens, God knows for many there are such few choices available in this racist, classist, cis-sexist system. The God of the fringes, the impoverished, the oppressed, condemns every form of coercion and every act of control over the bodies of those who ask all the right questions of life and autonomy and futures and collective well-being. Under all the wrong systems that abandon and judge and isolate and weigh down. Let us not grow weary in claiming our power, in professing and practicing our solidarity, in sharing our resources, and in following the one who from the margins cries, "Come and follow." Those are the words of the Reverend M. Barclay from the publication Infleshed. Friends, let us not grow weary in claiming our power. Let us not grow weary of reaching out to one another. Let us not grow weary of the work that we are called to profess and practice our solidarity, to share our resources, to make sure that there are no barriers to the bodily autonomy of those among us who seek to practice their fundamental human right to bodily autonomy. May it ever be so. Blessed be, and amen.
Thank you. Please join in our sending hymn, We Are, by Dr. Issei Barnwell of Sweet Honey in the Rock. This recording is from the GA 2020 Virtual Choir.
For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. Oh, for each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. Oh, for each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage, fathers of time, daughters of dust, and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life, and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth, keepers of faith, makers of peace, and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage, fathers of time, daughters of dust, and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life, and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth and keepers of faith, We are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are one.
I love that song.
I belong to this world just as I am. We are our grandparents' dreamings. We are children of the universe and of God. The choices we make for our own bodies are essential. They are essential to who we are, what we believe, what we know. The choices others make for their bodies are something we have to trust. We have to come to trust one another to be making the best choices for our own bodies, for their own bodies, for the good of themselves, their families, their lives, this world, their networks. Deeply rooted in our principles is that principle of bodily autonomy and of trusting one another, the inherent worth and dignity of each person, that they can make the choices that are best for them. Friends, I hope you trust your body. I hope you know that you are a beloved child of the universe, a blessing. As I release the flame, I invite you to join in singing the fivefold amen. May you go into this week, blessed and blessing the world. We hold you in our love as you go.